So, you're going to love this story. And I want you to know how much, I'll be honest, I feel like I do not have a lot of boldness in me, but the boldness I have in me, I borrow on from a lot of people that I follow on Instagram, and you are one of them.
Oh, my
And
heart.
you stand up for what's right, right? And so I was in a meeting with my boss who I was standing up for some people, and with like 5 people were in the room. So 5 people and my boss, and I'm standing up for these people. And the next day, boss wants to meet with me, and boss puts a meeting on my calendar for half an hour saying to talk about some stuff. And I was like, okay, you know what? I've been in this game long enough. I know exactly what some stuff means. Like, we're not going to play this game. So she basically sits me down and says, I really feel like you have so many opinions and so many things to say. And I'm thinking maybe you want to be more of an observer in these meetings, rather than, talking. And I said, would you rather I just didn't come to these meetings? And she said, yeah, no, we're not even done yet. This actually gets better. When I tell you what she said after that, you're going to be like, oh my God, this is hysterical. And some people you just can't help. I was like, you know what? I had some things to share with you too after our meeting, but I think I'm going to talk to you tomorrow about them. I was like, you know what? And so she's like, well, do you want to give me any insight? And I was like, not really. So
No, I do not.
no, I don't. So the next day we get on a call, and I read her this long resignation letter, basically saying she's a micromanager, and that I'm here for the RAs, not for her. And so then I quit, right? And so she goes, I didn't have a job, I was just like, I quit. She goes, and I'm like, she goes, oh, I'm sorry, you must have misunderstood. That's not what I said at all. And I was like, okay. I'm like, what did you say? All right. I did not mean that you should not speak up. What I was trying to say is that, that you're so energetic, and that I was just thinking you might want to tone it down and talk less unless you're supporting me.
But you can talk so long as I approve of the content of what you say.
And I was like, you know what? You just missed the whole point. I quit. I'm done. I'm out. And I said, that is so inappropriate what you just said. And then she said, well, I think I'm ending this meeting. I'm like, okay, then end it. It's done. I quit. Bye. And
I think I'm ending this meeting.
and I'm like, all right. And then I sent
Okay.
the biggest resignation letter ever. I was like, they're not going to hire, because I'm like, you know what? Somebody has to speak up. So I was like, I'm burning this bridge. It's
Yeah.
actually been really interesting. I burned the bridge with those two, but built bridges with 800,000 other people, because they're all like, thank God you're speaking up and blah, blah, blah. And no one wants to burn
Sure,
bridges, so they
yeah.
won't speak for us. And I'm like, but I'll be honest, it kind of broke me inside a little bit. I was like, oh my God, this is like a breakup. I'm in shock. I've been dumped. No, I didn't. I dumped them.
No, you got out of a toxic relationship.
I know, right? I was reading Happy at Work, and I was like, I'm not happy at work. I'm not.
Yeah.
This last year has been a year of journeys. And so let's start off. I want to invite Maybe Burke into my living room, as it were, to the podcast. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you here. My wife is excited that you're here. She's fangirling in there. Author of I Love Orgasms. We're not going to be, we'll talk about it a little bit, but we're not going to be talking orgasms today, though. Like, the truth is, we all love them. And if you want to love them more, you go into so much awesome detail in this book. It is unabashed. But as wonderful as this is, I actually wanted to have you on today because you're an artist and an educator, and you educate about some really beautiful, right? Because trans is beautiful, trans is gorgeous, it's magical, it's lovely, but like the journeys that many of us have to go through in the workplace and in terms of dealing with the environments that we're in can be very, very difficult. And you educate in that space, and that is difficult work. So I'm curious to know, as you share, your story, what called you to this work?
My goodness. I mean, it's work that I need to be doing. When I was in college, I was still choreographing shows at my high school. I was like working at my high school while I was in college. And my former director was a history teacher, and he taught a social issues class. And on his curriculum was the topic of like gay marriage. And this is before that was legalized in our country. And he was a gay man, and he was talking to me, and he was like, I don't really know, like, I can't really, like, teach this from my personal experience, because then I'm, like, pushing my agenda onto the kids, like, And I was like, I'll come talk to them. And he was like, okay, really? And I did. And it did like unlock something in me, and it like opened something up in me because I was able to see that like through just telling stories about my own life, I was able to watch students in the class change their minds, like pretty directly. Um, then after college, I was working with a theater company, and I knew I wanted to do like educational content around queer identities and things. And so I went to a training that was mostly for psychologists and therapists, I believe. And it was just like a general like LGBTQ competency. And it was so bad that I knew I had to do better.
You're like, I can do this. Let's do this.
And so what calls me to this work? Spite.
You know what? I was reading something about this, and nothing fuels people like spite. It will push you. You will strive for excellence.
Yeah.
And it is so true. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just like, I see people doing this ineffectively, and I saw me doing it effectively. And I was like, well, I gotta just keep on keeping on. And my theater background, like my experience as a writer, like I'm a storyteller, and so like I do have the tools to like emotionally manipulate an audience into like caring about the things that I want them to care about. I think you know that it's more than emotional
Oh my God,
manipulation,
absolutely.
but,
I just love how you said it. I was like, that's like the most amazing. I've struggled with the language because really that is what we're doing. We're influencing the people to, I mean, like that's,
Yeah.
but you have to, it's a skill. You know, not everybody has it because some people will sit and read off of a book and you're like, oh my God, I'm not influenced at all. I'm influenced to fall asleep right now.
Yeah, but it's like a thing that I do as an actor, it's a thing that I do as a writer and all of those things. Like if you want somebody to care about a character, they have to fall in love with them before the bad things happen to them, or they're just this sob story. And so that's like the approach that I take to my trainings and with my education is like, I'm gonna be fun and cute and like make you laugh and then make you think, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the approachable, fun trans person. When I was starting out, I was aware that most often I was the first trans person somebody was like meeting or seeing. And today that's not necessarily the case, but I do have the opportunity to be the first trans person somebody likes and that somebody can like relate to.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I name in my trainings often that I am cute. And that's
You're adorable,
I list
by the way.
Thank you. I list it with like my privileges, but it is because like I use it and I know how to leverage it. And I get results with it.
First of all, I want to name so many things that you just did. I love how you owned that. You're just like, I am cute and I'm going to use it. And I
Yeah.
think that like one of the biggest challenges that we all struggle with really is acknowledging whatever our gifts, wisdom, beauty, whatever those things are, right? And so we're reticent to share them, and so it makes us hard for us to have the impact in the world that we want to have because we're so busy fighting our own demons. And
Yeah.
the way that you shared that information was kind of like there's work done there, right? To be able to sort of just name it. And I love it. And I love that confidence. I myself am working on that for myself where I can say things and just have them roll off my tongue and be like, and because of blah, 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 I'm blah, blah. And it's like, I want to sound just like that. So that's on my list. So every time I love having that here because so many of us don't have models, right? You just modeled it for us. And that's what's really important is that I can have a conversation with someone or you can have a conversation with someone about owning their awesome, but unless they actually see someone say, I'm cute and I'm going to use it to actually move ahead. Great, right? Like own the privileges you have and then leverage them. I love this so much. What a great lesson.
Yeah, thank you.
Question for you, actually, because, you mentioned the story and that you're the first trans person that many people know, right? And that's true for me as well in that, well, I would say that because of the environment in which I work, I would argue that I'm the first trans person that a lot of people know. I would imagine that there's a lot of closeted people within the organizations that I work at.
Yeah, I'm the first trans person people know that they know.
Yeah, know that they know.
Yeah.
So the question I have for you is in the work that you do, because I work in academia a lot, and I'll have you know, I went through all of your speaking, and I've pulled them out in various different spots because the questions I had
Oh no.
are related to. Oh my God, no, you have like the most perfect trainings because these solve individual problems that I've seen in
Yeah.
organizations. And so one of the questions I have is that so there is a trend. So I was out in trans in the workplace. So you know there's a element of boldness there that's like, okay, like I have and for me in general I tend to be like, whatever, say whatever, do whatever, but that's cultivated. Not everybody has that privilege. That is the result of an enormous amount of privilege. And so the question that I have for you is what are some of the challenges that someone who is either out or not out in the workplace, what are some of the things that they struggle with that would keep them from coming out or feeling comfortable, even if the organization thinks that it's like, you know, you have your DEI committees and we have our pride flags and we have all that. So what are some of the things that would make someone feel unsafe in an organization or uncomfortable?
The limit does not exist. There's so many answers to that. It is funny. I mean, I am self-employed, and so I wasn't necessarily navigating like an organization, but like I recently did shift my pronouns, and just like with even like my friends and family, I felt weird telling people there was a change. Like there is just like an internal thing that happens for folks, like having to come out, having to like disclose your identity in a new way, that like regardless of a workplace just
Mm-hmm.
is awkward for people sometimes. Like I did experience that. Literally my brother called me at one point and was like, "Are you not going by they them pronouns anymore?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Sorry." And he was like, "My coworkers think I'm misgendering you now." Like he was like, "I'm," and I was like, "Ooh, sorry." I just didn't want to call you. Like I didn't. And he was like, "Okay, I'm not mad, but like I'm kind of mad." Like so there is just the hurdle of just like the awkward social interaction of it all, that like
Yeah.
I hated telling people those things. And like I do what I do for a living, you know? Like it's a very interesting thing. Within the workplace, there's also plenty of barriers. I mean, I was talking about this with my mother recently, that like she never gave me an indicator that she wasn't going to be an affirming person when I was growing up. And still, I was terrified to tell her things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't always know how far that rainbow flag is gonna go. You know? Like, somebody. And honestly, for me, sometimes when somebody's, like, decked out in rainbow gear and stuff, I'm just like, is that
Are
all
you
it is,
hiding for
though?
something? Are you
Like,
hiding something? Is there any
yeah,
deal?
I'm
Yeah,
like,
totally.
what are you beyond wearing this, you know? Um, and so yeah, the barriers include like literal job discrimination. There are multiple states in our country where folks can lose their jobs for being
Mm-hmm.
trans or non-binary. And so like having to deal with that. There's also just like I know when I changed my name, I was working like multiple random jobs and like different customer service positions and things, and like for a full year probably afterwards, like my checks would come in under a different name, and like I different people called me different things, and it was just like so much paperwork surrounding it that like
Oh
honestly
my God, the
sometimes
paperwork is insane.
yeah, and
Oh
like
my God, my wife is doing
systems
paperwork. It's so
changing
wild.
over. Yeah. And so like sometimes it's actually easier for folks to wait until they find a new job and just start a new fresh
Uh-huh.
transition. And I know plenty of folks who do look for new jobs when they start transitioning so they can get a clean slate,
Mm-hmm.
um, with paperwork and coworkers, you
Yeah.
know, like across the board. If people don't know your old name, then you don't have to go through the awkward phase of who's calling you what and all of that. So I would say, yeah, like just like the awkward social pressures of coming out show up in the workplace. And then there's also like, I often say that like a workplace is only as affirming as its least affirming person. And
Oh.
so even if you are rainbows down the hallway and all of that, if Fred in the corner office is a known transphobe, I'm not going to want to tell Sheila I'm trans, because what if Fred finds out?
Right.
You know? I made up Fred. Sorry if you have a listener named Fred.
Did Fred? Sorry, Fred. You know, I actually want to
Sorry if you work in a corner office.
you have a training that you do on this, and actually, I think it's one of the first trainings. Okay, so actually, I want to pull back a little. No, I have ADHD. I'm not going to pull back. I'm going to keep going.
So do I.
Fuck
We'll get
that
lost.
shit. That's not happening. We're staying on it. Okay. So you talked about Sheila and Fred, those poor people, and
Sorry to anyone with those names.
you know, I saw an interesting quote the other day because you with the flags and whatnot, you make me think of this term ally, right? And I saw a quote the other day that said, and I can't remember, I'm going to butcher it, but it basically said, "Ally is not a term you can claim for yourself; it's a privilege that's bestowed upon you by the community that you support." And one of the earlier trainings that I saw from you was unpacking privilege from ally to accomplice, and you like how I threw that in there. And it's a really, really good training because there are a lot of people who are, like you said, put the rainbow flags on, and they're like, okay, I'm an ally. But the truth is, it's not really allyship as much as it's I'm wearing flags more performative than actually doing anything beyond that, right? So I'd actually love to hear a little bit more about sort of your idea about allies in the workplace and like what you think, you know, obviously there's an entire training on this, so this is not something we're going to be able to cover in like a 5-minute answer, but you know, you got time. Can you do that? But if you could sort of elucidate that.
Yeah, I talk a lot about the idea that, like, there's a difference between acceptance and support. Acceptance is passive. Like, a mother didn't kick her son out. That's acceptance. Mm-hmm. Support is a verb. That takes action. That you have to do something in order to support somebody. You can't just say, like, cool, you're who you are. That's acceptance. Support has to go a little further. In my personal opinion, allyship is acceptance. Mm-hmm. Allyship is letting people be who they are. And then I like to move folks into what does advocacy look like? And or what does activism look like? Like that's kind of like my tier 2 that I talk about. In like that actually takes some effort, that takes some sacrifice, and that takes some work on your own part. And then we move into like what is an accomplice? Like an accomplice has a negative connotation and is usually like, but also like throughout history, accomplices in social justice work have broken laws. I mean, like the Underground Railroad was illegal, you know, like, and those were accomplices breaking the law in order to help folks find freedom and safety. And so like, I talk in that about like those kind of 3 tiers. I have like allyship, activism and advocacy, and then being an accomplice. Mm-hmm. And what I'm not saying that you're a bad person if you're in the allyship corner and that you have to get to being an accomplice, because also like different social structures, like different like levels of privilege mean that you might not be able to always be in the accomplice spot. You might not always be able to sacrifice like everything and all of that conversation. But we need all of those things to exist at the same time. And different people have different skill sets. I'm not an activist. I'm not. I correct people when they call me an activist. I have so much social anxiety. Like, I don't...
Me too.
I don't go to protests because I know that the work that I'm good at doing, I won't have the energy, like I won't have the spoons left to do the work that I know how to do if I'm wasting them at a rally. Like, I'm not good at that work. And I know the work that I'm good at, and I can do that work in tandem with folks who are doing activism.
I love the way you approach the world. I honestly feel like, I'll tell you, I didn't learn any of this shit till I was like in my 40s. I just have to be really honest, like, rock on. I wish I'm like, oh my God, I learned so much. It's just beautiful.
And everything that I've learned and a lot of the ways that I do think and approach this work and the world is directly from people who have been doing social justice work for years and years. Specifically trans women of color, like specifically Black trans women. I have learned so much from organizers in my life, like people that I've read from, and like the conversations of like how community and how intersectionality, but togetherness, saves us is the way that I approach that conversation.
You know what's so interesting about that is because so 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, it's April 2018. It was like the rock bottom time, and it was the beginning
That's
of
5 years ago.
rebirth. Yeah, God, I know, right? It's like, geez, it was like a great rebirth that happened and so on. But in the last few years, since I found you specifically, so you were a huge catalyst in my life. I know, right? I'm just gonna tell her all this stuff on the podcast. It's fab. This is why I got you on the podcast, so I could tell you all these things and embarrass you. No, so it was you. I found. I can't even remember how I found you, but I started following you, and just by posting the kinds of things that you post, you made me question myself in many ways. Like I went through an enormous growth journey. And one of the things that I really started to do was exactly as you said, is looking to other the teachers in our community. And what I found is exactly as you're saying, is that the black women, black trans women, and I want to name, thank you for naming that. I want to just name that there has been so much. And so anybody listening, like, and I will put a list of links for this, in that there's so many of people who have been doing this work all along. They've been consistently doing it. You learn from them. And what's super interesting, and please support your black trans creators. Everybody send money to your creators who do this work. Nobody gets paid to do this work. Send them money. Send us. Not money. Send maybe money. Don't send me money. I don't want money. You took what they taught, right? Percolated it out, and then I heard it from you in a way that at that moment in my life I needed. And I think the thing that I have learned from you, starting with you, was that there is almost like, it's the circle of life. I can't sing to save my life, but it's the circle of life of education, right? Where we are all doing this work. And so I think you said, like, you're not bad if you're an ally. Like, it's not bad. We need everybody, every piece, whatever. But I think there's a question to be asked there, right? Like, because like if I'm an ally, and I may say this wrong, so help me out here. So if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna say the ally, right? But I don't do anything else, then what is my belief actually, right? Like what? And I don't. This is like a therapy question, but I feel like it says something if you're not taking any action at all.
And that goes to the point that you brought up. That is true, and I've heard that often. That, like, you can't just call yourself an ally. You have to be called that.
Yeah.
Like, that has to come from somebody else, because you have to do something to show it, you know? Like, I can't, like, that whole, in, like, was it 2016 that people were, like, wearing safety pins so people knew that they were somebody safe to, like, approach on the street if they, like, needed help or something? I had no
idea.
And I was like, literally? Manessa, literally, that was like a thing that was happening around when Trump got elected, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I hid in my house after that.
I had a huge safety pin on one of my jackets before I knew that that was happening. Just like as a stylistic choice. I was like, wait, that's just like a thing that like goths do. Like there are people who have safety pins like down their pants. Like, you can't just, like, start using that to mean something else now, when that's been, like, in style for years. Like, so, yeah, like, there is just, like, all that, like, weird symbolism that people do to make themselves feel better. Yeah. And I'm like, I have never felt better by posturing without actually benefiting somebody who didn't look like me. You know? Like, no good deed goes unpunished. Like, we do, like, feel good when we get to help people, but like I've never felt good because I like said that I was an ally
or posted a sign. Like I've never put a sign outside my house that's like a pride flag and been like, look at me, I did my civic duty today, helping my people.
Right. Like
and that I think that's, and I guess to, you know, taking that into the workplace, I think that's right. That you what training was it that I did with you? I did a training with you. I've done a lot of trainings with you, where in fact I went through once I found you and just did every single one that you offered. And so there was, and which one was it? Oh, it was the how to be an ally in the workplace. And oh my God, it was amazing. Like that training was so good. And what I liked about it was really talking about, so let's say I accept you for who you are, but somebody over there is, you know, misgendering you. And you did like a really great role play where basically, you know, someone misgendered somebody else. And then you sort of did a thing where you said, hey, I believe that, you know, Manessa uses they, them pronouns, whatever. But like, when you are in the workplace, it's kind of, first it's hard for the trans person to do that, right? Like to advocate for themselves. Like I'm bold as shit, but
Yeah.
when people misgendered me, I just let them. I let them all. I was too much of a pussy to say anything. I was like, whatever. And nobody stood up for me. So I immediately understood this is not a safe place, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that's, and now again, every single one of those people is actually very nice, like wonderful people. So I'm curious to know, like, because this is what, when you train on this, like, how do you navigate the best of intentions and like help people move to the space where they feel comfortable, like saying, oh, I believe that maybe uses she, her pronouns now, or whatever.
Yeah, so similar to what I was saying with like the different tiers of like allyship to accomplice, everybody has their own skill sets and everybody has different things that they're going to be comfortable doing. And so when I do those trainings, I don't tell you like this is how you should do this is how you have to do this, like this is your script. I give people options because I know that not everything that's going to work for me is going to work for you. And so knowing that, yeah, not everybody's going to be comfortable stopping somebody in the middle of their sentence and be like, hey, I think that Manessa uses they, them pronouns. But you might be comfortable having a one-on-one with that person afterwards. You might be comfortable, like, doing it in different ways. And so I try to give people, like, a myriad of approaches there. Because also, the person that you are trying to make change their behavior, they're going to respond to different things. They might get really defensive if you do it in front of everybody, and you might have a better chance if you do it one-on-one privately. And so I like to give people as many approaches to that as possible. And also, it's funny, I'm literally working on a video that says this right now for my social media, but when you said, like, they're nice people, they're people who, like, are friendly and, like, want everybody to get along. And a lot of nice people think that interrupting and, like, correcting somebody when they've said something wrong is not nice.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like to think of, especially with like gender and microaggressions, but like across the board, if I'm correcting somebody, like if I'm offering somebody some support in updating their language, that's because I like them and I respect them and I want them to do better. I don't correct people when they misgender me. I'm luckily in a position where I don't get misgendered very often
Yeah.
anymore. But historically, I don't really do it. And part of that is because, like, I don't wanna. And the other part of that is because I mean, usually these days, if you're misgendering me, you're not a person that's important in my life. And so, like, whatever. Um, but also, like, if I am to correct you, like, if you are somebody that I do sit down with and be like, hey, I'd rather you not say this, it's a sign of respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, when I do choose to have those conversations, it is like me trying to maintain a relationship with you and not cast you off. And so, like, naming a problem is not causing a problem, it's the beginning of solving that problem. And so,
Mic drop. That's gonna be a clip.
because a lot of
Mark that over
people,
here.
a lot of people do, like, they're like, well, these people keep, like, bringing up that they're getting misgendered. And I'm like, right, because they keep getting misgendered. Like, there already is a problem happening. And we can play nice and just, like, but the problem is when you try to ignore the problem or you just, like, try to get through, like, growing pains, what happens is that the person experiencing the microaggression does so quietly and alone. And if we acknowledge the thing and let other people talk about it, and everybody gets to kind of share that burden, and so it's a little less heavy on the person who's experiencing it, and we can address it faster and get rid of it completely, hopefully.
Holy shit, that's so good. That is like, that is exactly like, you know, I think that we are so used to being, when someone is calling us out on something, to taking it personally in judgment. And I think it was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, during that growth period, my sister said something to me related to judgment. And I realized that I was harshly judging everybody, but it started with harshly judging myself. And like, I had to release myself of my own judgment inside And then once those things started to go, then now there's just no judgment, right? Like I don't judge anybody, but we have to recognize that it's possible to name a problem without actually saying, I think you're a bad person, and or like I hate you or whatever. It's in fact, I love that we are framing, because it's true, right? Like, why would I bother having this conversation with you if I, and in fact, it's even worse if I say, you know what, I'm not even going to bother, right? Like, because I have written you off then.
Right. If
Oh.
I don't care about what you say about me, that to me is one of like the biggest insults I can
Oh
give
my
you.
God, I know, right? That is terrible. You know, though, I think that one of the things that I struggled with when coming out in the workplace, and you know, I know, and you mentioned earlier that you know, I know that you're self-employed and worked in many different places, but a lot of your trainings are in the academic area, and I went through like the list of places that you've spoken, and so one of the things that I found was that someone says blah blah blah, Vanessa, she, her, like she said blah, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's just the two of us, and I'm like, okay, I use they them pronouns, and then the conversation starts. Well, you know, it's really hard to use they them pronouns, blah blah, and then there's the English language one, which I mean that one's easy to solve. We're not going to go there, but there's a whole conversation that then turns into like a 15-20 minute conversation about their experience with the terms they them and why they can't use them and so on. And like, and honestly, the reason why I didn't correct people is because I just got tired of having that conversation and having meetings derailed. Like, it's like, dude, we don't need to talk about, oh, folks, I was trying not to say dude anymore. It's not working great, but it's like, it's less. I'm using it a lot less now.
It took me like 3 years to get guys out of my language, so I get it.
Yeah, guys, I've almost gotten out. My problem is that I need a singular one, right? So like I say folks for plural. I don't have like a singular exclamation that I can just dude, right? So I need some sort of a word. It doesn't even have to be person. It could just be
I use friend.
friend. Sure, we'll try that. I'll try that. So, what was I saying? Friend. We don't need to go through this whole thing. We can just say, oh, sorry, they, them, and move forward, right? So I'm curious to know, in all the different types of organizations that you've spoken at, you don't have to say which ones are different. Have you found that there is a difference in terms of acceptance level, comfort level, the amount of time, the amount of hour-long explanations people will give afterwards in response to misgendering?
Yeah, I mean, I can't necessarily say that like this field has this response and
Right.
necessarily narrow that down, but it usually depends. It's largely generational, depending on like the average age of your workforce.
My audience is mostly Gen Xers. I'm 47. I will tell you, I misgender myself. Okay, I have to struggle. Like you got to learn.
Yeah. But it is, I don't like to like generalize about generations often, but I do know that like older generations are a lot less comfortable admitting when they've done something wrong. And that's where that comes from. It's not even usually about the person's gender. It's about like the defensiveness over admitting that you've said something wrong.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it is like a generational gap that happens there. It also depends on the gender of the person and or like their social location within other categories of identity. If you are a person who experiences marginalization in any way, you are more likely to understand what it's like when somebody else experiences microaggressions because you're probably experiencing your own, you know? And so like I was gonna say, but I don't think I've ever been brought into like a male dominated workplace. Which is telling. Like I don't think I've ever hopped on a training and been like, where are your women? Because they're usually the only ones who show up. That's interesting. That's a little thing that I'm learning right now.
Well, you know what else is interesting is I've actually, when I'm going on my own gender identity, I've always felt more comfortable in the company of women, but I'm, you know, gender fluid, and like it's very interesting. Like I feel like there's a paper here. Maybe there's a paper here. There's definitely an Instagram reel here somewhere. Like there's stuff that's going to come out of this.
Yeah, I mean, men are scary.
It's a good point. Sorry, I lost my questions. I realized there's one more question. Like we've gone through. Like I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose it because I have under your bye binary right here and basics of gender affirming language. I wanted to make sure I got that in there. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was not ignoring you.
No, I
hate
did
when
not
people
feel
look at their
ignored.
computer while I'm talking. It drives me insane. And I did it. I realized, God, that looks so rude. So I wanted to.
I did not feel slighted.
You mentioned about talking about the binary, right? Like, I think that's one of the things, I know we don't like to talk about, and I also don't like to talk about generations, but I do feel like, because I can see differences in terms of just how we were raised, right? Like, I see that the Gen Xers, like the younger generations, are being raised very differently from the way that I was. And I think that what you're talking about related to this not wanting to be wrong is, or like this being called out, is our conditioning from birth to sit down, shut up, be quiet, and you always have to be right or do the right thing, right? So, like, now to be called out on being wrong, it's almost like it's a fundamental, like, it's, you'd think it's something small, but it's really like, I'm rejecting you as a person at this moment. And I feel like we just did a little therapy here, and I may be more empathetic towards people, in the future as we have these conversations. But I do think that that's a challenge, and so I'm curious to know. You have a couple of different trainings about this. You have the bye binary, and then there's a basics of gender affirming language that you train on. And when you go into the organizations and you have these conversations, is it really about, like, are you? Because you mentioned the binary isn't real. It's just something that we created, however many years ago. Was it like 100, 200 years ago, to, like, for our own ridiculous purposes. Sell razor blades, I think, to get women to shave their legs, maybe. So the question I would have is when you do these kinds of trainings, how do they, you mentioned people change just right in the call. Tell me a little bit about those and how they go for you and what you enjoy about them.
Yeah, the fun thing with binary is a lot of people have the idea that non-binary is this newfangled idea that is just showing up in the past 10 years. And actually, if we look at human history, the gender binary is the new idea. Like, that is the thing that we've introduced. And there are plenty of cultures and societies and, like, structures of gender throughout the world, throughout history. And that's where not everybody's ready for this conversation in my trainings, but the people who are ready for this conversation, it's all linked to systems of power. And often, the ways that we have set up in a very white concept to kind of otherize and demonize that are a lot of the cultures and societies I'm talking about that, like, have those histories of gender expansion. And yeah, the term non-binary is relatively new. When I learned that I was non-binary, I didn't know the term non-binary. Like, that's how new it is. Like, and the term is new, but it's describing identities and experiences that have been around as long as people have been around. And so being able to come in with, like, history like that and show that to people and be like, what you were taught isn't necessarily always the right thing, right? Like, you were learning about the gender binary while you also thought Santa was bringing presents. You know?
Dinosaurs are reptiles.
Right. You also thought that Christopher Columbus just, like, found this land.
Oh, look! Land! I found it!
And I'm like, if the same people teaching you about those things were teaching you gender, because we teach kids gender every day. It's just, what version are we teaching? Don't you think that there might be a little more to the conversation than what people taught you? Like, don't you think there's a little bit more to go on? So a lot of my, like, introductory stuff is, yes, I'm giving you information, but I'm trying to peel away as much information that you've been given that isn't necessarily helpful or accurate. And so a lot with all social justice work, like, before you can really learn, you have to unlearn. And you have to be open to that learning. Because if I just come in and I'm telling you about trans people and it contradicts things you already believe to be true, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna compute. Like, we have to first open up the, like, why that's not true. We have to show how that's not everyone's experience. And so, yeah, I have a couple of different ways of trying to peel that, and it's not always effective on folks, I'll say. Like, sometimes in my trainings, I'm like, this person is not going to really get this. Sometimes, though, 3 weeks later, something will shift. And you'll understand it.
A little.
I always say, like, my trainings are the beginning of a conversation, and then it's up to you to either hire me again. Like, I do like having like ongoing relationships with clients, or it's up to folks to continue those conversations when I'm gone.
Do you work one-on-one with people? So let's say, for example, somebody at an organization is like, you know what, after watching, seeing this with you, I actually want to massage some of this stuff because I have a trans employee and I really want to get better at managing or blah, 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 right? Would you work with them one-on-one?
Yeah, I've done that for a long time, and I've just built it in a more like specific and official capacity that I do one-on-one coachings with folks. There's the leg of for folks who are exploring their own gender identity and trying to figure out things about themselves, because I've also done that with folks. I've worked as a mentor for like artists in that field and everything. And there's also a leg for folks who are trying to disrupt transphobia in work, in their family, like wherever that shows up and whatever that looks like. Because, yeah, like a training only does so much. It is my career.
Training, maybe.
Like, it is my career. I'm very proud of the work that I do, and I know that it's not the whole story. Like, I do have consulting services that I can, like, have ongoing relationships with workplaces, and the one-on-one gets to be really fun. Mm-hmm. And that, because that gets to be a lot more, like, specific, and I don't have to, like, cater to how everyone in the space might be learning. I can actually just be like, okay, let's talk about what you need. Let's talk about the options that work for you, and then we can unpack deeper, faster.
Oh, I love that so much. So I'll tell you. So I found you and I followed you on Instagram, and then I started watching some of your trainings, and I watched them out in the living room, and I'm like, and it's funny, when I look back on my life, every signpost of transness was there. Like, literally every signpost was there, right? Like, to say, hey, and coming down to when I was 11, I said I was, actually when I was 11, I actually said I was a boy, but that didn't seem right either. And eventually I figured out what it was. But I mean, I was 11, it was 1987 or 89. So, there really was they're like, no, you're not, you're just a tomboy. Okay, great. So anyway, I come out to my wife. Suddenly I realize, I'm like, shit, I'm trans. Holy shit. I'm gender fluid. I ended up on gender fluid, but what's funny is I expected this, but also didn't expect this. You talk about how you help people to figure it out for themselves. My wife's listening to you. She's listening to you. One day she calls me on the phone. She goes, I'm trans. I'm a woman. And I'm like, of course you are. Everything makes sense now. Everything makes sense. Literally, the moment she said it, I was like, of course you are. I'll see you when you get home. Let's figure out what we're doing. And we started the whole journey and everything. And, now we're like a year and a half into it. But our exposure to you is what started the journey so many years ago. So thank you for everything that you have done for us. Like, without even knowing it, this is the kind of impact Maybe has on your life.
Oh, that was all just beautiful. I used to do a lot more in colleges specifically. And before the pandemic hit, every time I spoke in a college, some student came up to me afterwards to either tell me that they are trans and that I'm the first person they're telling. Sometimes they realized it while I was speaking. Or they were like the trans person on campus, and I'm the first trans person they saw with a job and like a trans adult in the world. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. And I know that I am, with like a small platform that I have built for myself, I am that for you and your couple. And a lot of other folks. And it's one of the most beautiful things that I could ever be given in this world, because it's that quote of she needed a hero, so that's who she became. Mm-hmm. Like, all I want to do is be who baby Maybe needed to see when she was growing up and figuring out who the fuck she is. Because I literally remember a time when I was like looking up like clothing for gay men. And now I'm like, bitch, you were looking for the women's section.
Yeah, it's so fun. We had the same thing here. We went through every single category. And it's just the women's section. Like
Yeah. And it's so funny that like even until recently there were things that I like wasn't sure that I like wanted or needed and all of those things. And yeah, just being able to like be very vulnerable with my audience and with platforms and being able to like share that stuff with other people. A thing that I learned, I have the tendency, people have this like these two tendencies that I think are, I experience both of them in different ways, where one is the idea that like I have this thought, like this is how everybody thinks, but the other one is like I'm the only person who has ever thought this thing.
At the same time. You can hold both of those thoughts at the exact same time.
Depending on like what they are about, right? And so what I've learned in my work and just in my life, there is not a fucking thing that I've thought that somebody else hasn't thought of. Like, that's not possible. And what I have learned that I'm very good at words. I'm very good at communicating. And like, kind of what you were saying at the beginning of our interview, that like, I'm very good at translating things in new ways for audiences. And so like, yes, I took things that I learned from Black women specifically, and I am able to like frame it in a different way that might reach more folks, and might make more sense to people in a different context and all of those things. Like I'm very good at the communicative side of all of these things. And what I learned early in my career is that I need to talk about those things that I'm experiencing because a lot of people are thinking them and they don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have the language to talk about the things that I talk about. And so if I can communicate what I'm experiencing, it gives people the tools to be able to communicate that for themselves as well. It's why I have like a series on Instagram and TikTok that I'm sure you've seen that is called Hey Worsty, where I like respond to trolls in my comments. And like that kind of stuff, like whenever I respond to hatred, it's never for the worsty. It's never for like the person who is never going to listen to me. But I use those opportunities with humor and like different approaches. I use those opportunities to model how I would respond to these things. And I like to give people language that I use so that they can go ahead and use it. And that's true for people who are trans and non-binary. That is true for cisgender folks who want to learn how to respond when they see microaggressions. Like, as much as I can give people scripts or options of how to talk and how people might be able to communicate about these things and how other people might want to learn about these things, then we can just keep the conversation going. A lot of what I do is just that domino effect.
And you know what? You just perfectly did this. I don't know if you did this on purpose, but we wrapped right around to the question at the beginning is, why do you do this work? Look at that. And now it's like, why you do it, how you do it. It's beautiful. Maybe I cannot thank you enough for your time today. I'm going to put the link to your speaking page in the show notes and all the information. You want to hire her for your organization because all my listeners are in academic organizations, they're research administrators. This is a space where we're trying to get more people in, and like in order for that to happen, we do need to create these more inclusive spaces. And I think that what you have to offer is so special, right? Like these ideas are things that lots of people are talking about, but the way you deliver it is just so special and accessible, right? Like no matter who listens to you, it's like, oh my God, you're a friend who's helping me figure this out. So what are your parting words to your friends, maybe?
Oh gosh!
No pressure, it's all good. Don't worry about it.
I thought I just summed things up very nicely. I was done.
No,
I'm teasing.
I'm done. Here, we'll go and buy the book I Love Orgasms and then go have one.
Enjoy. No, I mean, the reason that I do this work is because I'm good at it. I'll be honest. Like, because I know what I'm doing. And I that I also am an actor, and when I was performing a lot more frequently, often other trans actors in particular would talk to me and be like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry that I'm not like doing more advocacy. I wish that I could like be like you, like that kind of shoulding all over themselves of like what they feel like they should be doing. And I love to be able to turn to specifically other trans women, but trans people in general, and be like, I do this work so that you don't have to. The reasoning behind everything I do is because I know what I'm doing. I've seen results work really well, and it fills my cup. It is something that does, like, people ask me often how I like handle like how I self-care around these things. This is my self-care. If I know that there's a trans person in a workplace who is facing discrimination and having a terrible time, if I can make that person's workplace a little more affirming, and if I can make that person's experience at work more accommodating and comfortable for them, that fills me. Like, that is my self-care. And so I do this work because I know how to, and because it's all I know how to do.
Dude, and it was a great mic drop moment. This has been so helpful. I cannot even, like, this is going to help me more than you even know. Like, I'm just take this and share it with people who are in the workplace when they ask for help and they're not sure what to do. I'm like, here you go. Listen to my podcast with Maybe, and it will help you. Like it's been so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.